Welcome to the shop, or I guess what I should say, welcome to inside the trailer, because today we are going to be working on, or I guess I'm going to be working on, putting in the dividers for the cabinets. Now I've got one wall over here, and then a top piece that goes right about there. Now there are a couple considerations that I need to keep in mind with doing this. One, the electrical panel is right behind here, which means that probably should have some kind of ventilation. Now, I'm probably not going to be doing any fans or anything like that because that should not be needed. However, it will probably need a few air holes, so I do need to keep that in mind. I also want to be able to have access to that electrical back there, which means that I need one or two access panels. Now, I already have the measurements for the depth as well as the vertical span, and that is 22 1/4 from top to bottom and 13 15/16 back. So I've almost got 14 inches from the front of the cabinet all the way to the back, which gives me quite a bit of storage space, which is why I built it that deep. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut a couple of panels to fit vertically here, and then I'll have to just hope that I can get them to fit into the doors and get into their final position here. And I'll just be holding those in place with a couple of pocket screws, so if I ever did need to remove it for more access, I would be able to do so. But enough talking, let's get to cutting. The whole process took me a while because there was a lot of double measuring, and I actually ended up having to undo the screws from the back and re-level those because evidently those were nowhere near as level as I thought that they were. So to be able to get these sideboards in there properly, I had to do that. As you can see over here for the entry, I just cut a hole and I put these in there temporarily so that when I get hinges, I can just screw the hinges into the back. Now, unfortunately, this piece here was a little bit too wide after I drilled the pocket hole screws. So that means that, unfortunately, I've got to pick up some 1-inchers because these ones kind of came out this side. Now for the air ventilation, as you can see, I left about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch open on both sides. And this is the other side of it here. Now this isn't the best plywood and none of it really likes to go very straight. So with that being said, I think that it turned out okay. I'm not exactly happy with it, but I'm also not extremely disappointed with it, as it is a divider. And as you see here, I also got the top piece in, and this will be going somewhere right about here once I get the hinges for this, which I'll pick up when I pick up a small thing of the smaller screws. And due to the miracle of YouTube, we've got our hinges on, as well as I have added a little meg lock right here and here, as well as a little screw up top. Now that little screw does nothing except for allow me to get a little extra leverage on it when I open it. And the way that I'm opening it up is simply just finding that screw and giving her a little push with my finger. And there it goes. And if you look farther back in there, we also have the electrical for the plug underneath. Now I know that I was talking about putting it right up here for easier access, but I actually decided on this far back corner, and let me show you why. I figured that this is an awfully lot of space just to be wasting, and so I figured that it makes a nice little semi-hidden cubby to be able to store things that I may not always need. And once all the wires and everything are up in here, I can go ahead and put some thing around them so that anything in here doesn't disrupt the wires or vice versa. So that being in the back corner there kind of gets it out of the way from anything that I may want to put back here. Now I know the cabinets aren't the prettiest of things. Even if I put some paint on them, they're still not going to look great. So what I'm hoping to do is eventually I would like to get some of that fabric that they use in automotive interiors for like center consoles and subwoofers and that kind of thing. And I would like to do the entire inside with that in black, because I think that would look really nice. Now until I do get the carpet in here, it's not going to be an issue once I hopefully get the door frames made up, and that's going to be I'm not sure when, because I do need to buy some better plywood, I think, for the frames of that, just so then it'll look nicer than, well, what I'm using on the inside. But now that we got this project done, it's time to move on to the next. Now I decided that if I go through one of these boards here, it's not going to be a huge issue, and here's why. So I am planning on taking these 3 boards, which end up being just about exactly 2 inches, and I'm going to go ahead and glue them together. And then I can cut that so that it fits in here or wherever I decide to put that port. Which means, because these are quite a bit wider, that it will actually be adding support to it, even though that I'll be taking out a little bit of this here. So the first thing in this process was to get those boards glued up. Once they were glued and dried, I was able to cut them to size and place them into their positions. I'm not too worried about having it evenly glued and all of that, because it should be perfectly fine. Alright, so what I've done here is I've made up 2 little blocks and just simply taped them to it. And they are a little bit higher than what they really absolutely need to be, but I think it'll look better if the little covers are not touching the actual shelf. So I just realized it kind of looks like a face. Now it's kind of hard to see right now, but we've got a nose, we've got an eye, and then down here when the doors are in, it's going to look like a mouth. I'm not going to unsee that. But now what we got to do is figure out exactly where we want the vents to be. Now I'm kind of glad that they're not up here, because then it would look even more like a face. Now the way that I'm going to try to get these centered as much as possible is I'm just going to worry about the distance from the outer edge to the closest wall. So like this one will be to this wall and that one will be to that wall. That's how I'm going to measure them out, because that's the best way that I can figure to keep them at least even on the front as well as inside. So the question is, do I want them closer like that, or do I want them farther apart? Alright, so I figured out that I like about 13 inches from the wall to the edge of the air vent. So that's what I'm gonna keep them at. And what I gotta do now is I'm gonna go ahead and remove them from their place here, measure out 13 inches, and undo them from their little blocks here, because I need that little block to properly drill the hole. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use a hole saw, but I'm not going to go all the way through this right away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure it all out, lay it out, start to drill just enough for the middle of the hole saw to get through, so that I can properly space the support blocks on the outside. Alright, so after those blocks were glued up well enough that I could work with it, I went ahead and cut them to size, then added some pocket hole screws and screwed them in place. Now there is one little thing that I didn't take into account for, that I could not figure out in my head the proper way to do it, because I don't have a scroll saw, and any other way I think they would just be dangerous with the tools that I have. And that is, if you look right here, evidently this top board is not flush on either side. So I guess this piece, even though this is right where it starts to bend up at, it decided that it wanted to go flush with this instead. And so basically that's leaving an angled gap. So what I'm going to do, because the hole on one of these at least is going to come up and over it, I will probably put in some caulking in there as well as on the other side. Now the reason why I say that it may take out a little bit of this board on one of them is because that one is just a smidge lower than this one is on the inside. And I don't know how that happened. It must have been just I messed it up and probably came in at a little bit more of an angle on one side than the other. It won't be a big deal. You probably won't ever even notice it, unless if you're really looking at it. So I'm not too worried about it. It is what it is. It's too late to fix it at this point because, well, it's just a smudge off. So I'm just not gonna worry about it. So now that these are in place, I'm going to very carefully and very slowly start to hole saw from the other side through it. And there we go, we have our first hole. And unfortunately, the batteries in the drill are dying. So we are going to go ahead and do this off camera. And so in the next episode, we should be working on getting the shore power plug hole figured out and drilled, as well as the wire running for that. And hopefully we'll be able to get the insulation for all of this done and taken care of as well. So if you want to make sure that you see that, make sure to hit that bell, hit subscribe. And of course, if you're thinking about building one of these for yourself, go and check out the DIY Teardrop Campers community on Facebook. Make sure that you answer the questions that pop up when you try to join. A link for them is down below. And the reason why I tell you to go join them is because I definitely would not have gotten this far on this without a lot of the community's help and answers for a lot of this. And it's such a great group that even the author of the book that I am using to build this thing is even in the group. So he's very helpful. The community there is very helpful. The admins are especially helpful. Jay Poor over there is great. He's answered a ton of my questions. Down below in the comment section, I want to know how you would tackle the issue with the little gap here, as well as any other questions or comments that you may have, even if you tell me that I'm doing this whole thing wrong and it shouldn't be road legal. Let me know down there because I love hearing from you guys. Until next time, as always, you have a good one.